Okay, so I just wanted to finish off this afternoon. What was very interesting was before we were suggested on doing a symposium in Chiang Mai in Thailand, I was already writing a paper on the Karen, and I had been searching for probably 6 or 8 years for the source documents of the Karen. Can you just hand those over to me, the first two? And so 8 weeks ago, I found the source documents by if you can see that, I found the source documents from Dr. Francis Mason. He's writing in 1834 and 1835, the Karen of Burma, a remnant of the 10 tribes of Israel. And so this is the source document from nearly 200 years ago of the missionaries interviewing and documenting the Karen tribe, which I say would unequivocally, say that they are definitely lost tribes of Israel as well. So just wanted to say that. Okay. So I just want to give a history of what happened in Burma. It's sort of the Karen straddle Burma and the Thai border, but most of the missionaries were actually going to Burma 200 years ago. So Burma and Siam was around Bangkok. So the missionary Anadrum Judson arrived in Rangoon in the early 1800s. I think it was about 1817, something like that. And he went into the marketplace, but he found little response. So what he ended up doing was translating the Bible into Burmese and creating characters, so that they could, so that the Bible would be written in the local language. But one day a Karen man came to work for him, and so this is the Karen had a prophecy that one day a white brother would come and return their lost book, and so that's a very well-known prophecy here. So all the girls sitting behind me will nod their heads that there was a prophecy, a white brother with a book. Yes. Yeah. Everybody knows here that there would be there would be a white brother come and return their book. So this is the amazing story of the Karen and their lost book, and a man called Kotabiu. Is that it? Kotabiu, I'm told, who realized he was the first to find the book. So the Karen apostle, Kotabiu, realized the white brother had come with the lost book. And so so here's the map, which shows where the Karen are. With the purple arrow there. The red arrow that I've left pinned in the middle of this map is it's in Gaze province west of Chengdu. And so I think there was a big concentration of Israelites who are still there today in that. So I've just left the red pin there so we can get an idea of, as we go around the map, how many Israelites are in and around China. Okay, so Dr. Mason writes that the knowledge of creation, the fall, and a coming king was very pervasive among the ancestors of the Karen. He writes that they must be a 10 tribe of Israel remnant. Like he says it can be no other way. He originally thought that all of the biblical stories within the Karen themselves must have come from Portuguese. It must have come, earlier in, a couple of hundred years earlier than he was there. But when he interviewed all the tribal leaders, they said, no, it came from our ancestors. And so he ruled out that it couldn't have been Christians. It couldn't have been Jewish people. So he then came to the conclusion that they must be a far distant remnant of the 10 tribes of Israel. So we're talking in the 1800s, like 2,500 years later. So quite incredible that the Karen managed to keep many of their songs alive. Okay, so So we find Jews in Chengdu since the 2nd century BC. And so Dr. McGowan was talking about that in 1860 in the British Academy. And when he means Jews, he actually is referring to Israelites, because in the context of his sentence, that's what he's referring to. Okay. So, and this is the thing. Dr. McGowan in 1860 says the Quyang from Chengdu must be the progenitors of the Karen. In other words, the Karen come from the people where the red pin is. And so Torrance actually does quite a lot of work on that. I have Torrance's book. I'm probably the only person other than Princeton Theological Seminary that has it, but if people write to me, I'll send them the book on Dropbox. So George Moore, MD, writes about the Karen as lost tribes of Israel in his 1861 book. And his book's called Saxons of the East and West, New Views on Buddhism and Rock Carvings. And so what will be interesting to people like Howard Jung and Ari Masakubo is that a friend of George Moore's could read ancient Hebrew. And he said the ancient Sanskrit was identical to ancient Hebrew. And so they were able to translate much of the Buddhist rock carvings, and that's in his book, and that's available online at archive.org. So George Moore, Saxons of the East and West, if you do that, you'll find that. So then I go and look at the Manas epic in Altai in Kyrgyzstan, because they also have many Israelite traditions in amongst their people, and of course our Richard Hewitt, who's with us, he's sort of the expert on that. They have a long chant, and includes Richard says it's over 100. But there's quite a lot of biblical references in their very long chant. So the Altai and the Kyrgyz say that Jacob's brother, how do you say Jacob? Jacob went to the other side of the Himalayas, or Tibet. And so here we can see the other side of the Himalayas and Tibet is Myanmar and northeast India. So it just we're tying the stories of all these, Israelite peoples together by, as we said before, the two brothers with the rib in between the Japanese and the Kyrgyz. And now we've got a story from the Kyrgyz, relating to a brother at the other side of the Himalayas with, I think, monkeys and jungles and monkeys and elephants, which is what you'd find in Assam. So the Altai had a golden book that was lost, and it was carried over a river and fell into water. Whilst drying it, a cow ate it. Now, earlier in today, we had Demir's video, and on the front of that, he had the story of the golden book in a golden chest. So what's interesting about this lost book, these different versions of the book, is often a cow, like an animal, eats the book. So I'll just go through some of the other times. So the Kyrgyz say their book was taken by the Kitai Khan and burnt. So that's the king of the north, if I understand that correctly. Karen had a golden book, and it was burnt in a field, and the remains were eaten by chickens and pigs. And so that's their story. Okay. So the Karen had a golden book, once very similar to the story in Altai. The Mizo Kuki Chin in northeast India also had a book. In their story, a dog ate it after they ran away through a big hole in a big wall. So once again, we can see remnants of stories that happened in China with the Great Wall, the Big Wall. The Kyrgyz also have stories of people escaping through a wall, and then and hiding from people trying to put them into forced labor on a wall. Okay. So the interesting thing about the Mizo Kuki Chin in Northeast India is that they also had a ancestor called Manasi or Manmasi, just like the Kyrgyz and the Altai do. So what I'm trying to do in this presentation is tie together the different strands of what people remembered that ties them into different parts of the world, and all of them are in and around China. So Karen Lost Book matches other Israelite people's stories around the edges of China. And so we can see from the map there the many different stories. Okay. Reverend Torrance lived near the Chiang. They had a Day of Atonement ritual. So he writes about that. And he said while the Chiang priest was telling him about the ritual, then Reverend Torrance got out his Bible and read to him the book of Leviticus, chapter 16. And at that point, he says that the Chiang priest leapt off his chair and declared the Bible as their lost scriptures. So here's a story that ties this lost book, this lost scriptures, straight back to the Bible. And so here's another really amazing picture that comes from Reverend Torrance. So Reverend Torrance, he was living amongst them in the 1920s, so 100 years ago this year. Reverend Torrance lived near Chengdu, near the Kuang near Chengdu, and they had many Israelitish customs, including a Moses staff. And so here you can see the snakes around the pole, but the head of this, it actually says that the head of the staff is missing.
I want to say that the Kyrgyz also have a staff very similar to that.
I didn't know that.
And they call it the Moses staff also.
Okay, right, there you are. So there's another thing tying the Moses staff back to from the Kyrgyz back to the Xiangmen from China. Because we're in Thailand and on the border of Burma here, I just wanted to sort of list the other tribes that had a lost book story. So the Kutchins say that the Karai Karsang, their supreme being, whose shape and form a man cannot comprehend, gave their forefathers a book which they lost. Lahu say Guisha, creator of all things, gave their ancestors a written law written on rice cakes. During a famine, they ate them. So once again, it's not a dog eating something in this case, but somebody ate their books themselves in this case. Wa await a white brother like the Karen with their lost book. The Shan and the Palang people look to a fifth manifestation of Buddha who was spoken about in their scriptures that were lost in a war in Laos. Kui tribesmen await a messenger who will bring their lost book back to a special place of worship. So the Lahu also have a special place of worship. It's called longhouses, and they're still in all the villages over here today. You can actually go to a Lahu village and find the longhouses. Lisu in Yunnan province, China, believe a king, one of their own, would one day rule over them and restore their book in their language. You can just see that like the stories are all slightly different, but there's quite a lot of parallels there. The Nagas consist of 24 tribes. One tribe, the Remna, say the supreme being gave his words to their forefathers on animal skins and dogs ate it. Okay, so here's other Karen traditions that I've been collecting Karen traditions for probably 15 years now. So this paper's just I'm just putting all the highlights of the different things that I've found. They say they came from a land called Tibi Kobe, and they passed through a river of running sand. And many people think that this is the Gobi Desert and Tibet. Now, the interesting thing about this river of running sand, it's a Jewish myth of the Sambattan River. And so the Sambattan River legend is that somewhere in the world there's a river that flows with sand and rocks, and one day of the week on the Sabbath it stops flowing and you can go across on that time, but otherwise you can't get across this river of sand. Now the interesting thing is I think it's probably the Taklamakan Desert, and I think Dr. Shah Khan says that Taklamakan translate, you will be destroyed here. So here you've got a legend of a desert that you'll be destroyed at, and you've also got a legend of the Sambattan River flowing with rivers of running sand that you can't get across unless it's on the Sabbath. So we're just tying different legends together to see that they actually fit as a pattern. So here's another amazing Karen tradition. So I lifted this off something in 2010, and they were saying that that year was 2,749, which meant that this year, 2024, is 2,763, and it means that they started dating themselves since 739 BC, which is the first year of the biblical captivity of the northern kingdom of Israel, the half-tribe of Manasseh, Reuben, and Gad. So here I think we've actually got a people that for some reason decided they would just count their years from the time they went into captivity. And of course, it's the half-tribe of Manasseh, and many of the names that we hear out throughout today are the name of Manasseh. So that's really quite incredible as well. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. You're still seeing me. Tomorrow in the presentation I've got tomorrow, I'll have some of the parallels between the Karen songs and parts of the Bible that I've found. But the Karen have many songs that really highlight that, whoever's writing the songs knew biblical scripture. And so when the missionaries came here and found all those traditions, they just found that it was astounding, and it actually made a huge impact around the world. Like many people in Western countries were talking about who were the Karen from this particular time. So yeah. And so I haven't put this into my presentation, but all of those songs are now in the 2 papers that I've published. They're on academia on my account, or they're on my blog site, and so you can just read them in their entirety now. So that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, any questions?
Margot mentioned the book George Moore's. I find this book really, really interesting, important. Yeah, so I really highly recommend you guys all to read this, because it focuses on Parthia and Parthians in India. And interestingly, the only nation exempting India and Parthia is Karen. Yeah, so he believed that the Karens came directly from India, which was not the case. In my opinion, the Karen came from the east, not from the west. But I learned a lot about the origin of German culture from this book. So for example, there are pictures. I show you just one picture. One picture. Oops.
Oh, you can see on there.
Yeah. In this book is Buddhistic stupas from North India, and this construction, this art was done in caves, and it became the major trade of Buddhistic buildings, and it was built from the Parthians. So this Parthia was at that time Iran, and that's exactly what the Gothic architecture made about. This non-Roman arcs. So you find this architecture in Gothic churches in Europe. So if you want build high level arches, the only way is to do it in this way, and this was developed in Buddhistic caves. So it links this culture together. So very interesting, and also
Yeah.
these inscriptions. So
Thank you, Howard. Yeah, thank you, Margot.